And because it's springtime, April, and you must have seen some of the blossom pictures from Paris, it's just the perfect time to go and have a look at his gardens. So before we get started, I'd just like to quote Monet, right? He actually said that everyone discusses his art or pretends or tries to understand as if it was even necessary to understand, when all that is really necessary is just to love. But I'm actually going to attempt to discuss his art and attempts to bring my understanding of his art to you, not necessarily to analyze, but just to appreciate more the time that he's been living through and the efforts and the persistence that they gave, never giving up in his art and ever believing himself, so that today we have so many of the beautiful works of his to love, to enjoy. So this is my goal today, and it's probably going to be about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Well, he is a very prolific man, has done over 2,000 paintings, and he's lived to 86 years old. So there's really a lot that I love to share with you. So I'm going to start by talking a bit about how Monet became interested in painting, his childhood, and how did he learn to paint, and what kind of goals that he had. And the second part of our tour will be about Giverny and his house and gardens. It just so happens that before moving to Giverny, right, he moved around quite a lot, and he wasn't quite well established in art world yet. And for those 43 years, that was the first part of his life. And for the next 43 years, he basically spent it all in Giverny and his gardens. And the last 20 or so, the only subject he painted was the water lilies. So before I get started, just have a little bit of housekeeping. And our tour is run completely for free. As you know, we've launched this about 6 weeks ago. And thank you very much for really showing interest and joining us. We really rely on your generosity and support to continue our efforts. And if you feel like supporting us, you know, the platform, the equipment, the time and energy that went into all this project, we greatly appreciate your donation on the link that I just sent through. But if this taps into your daily life budget, don't worry about it. Do share our work with your friends, please. Like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channels so you can stay updated with the work we'll be continuously doing. So, and throughout our time together, please also ask me questions in the chat. I will not be responding them right away. I will look back. I will review all your questions and address all of them at the end of the tour. We'll be using photos from Commons, some of my photos, and also we'll be sharing some of the videos from YouTube. So, all right, that's it. Let's get started then. Throughout our tour, we also have questions. Well, this is my style that I love to get you guys engaged. So I have come up with about 15 poll questions throughout our tour as well, right? So these are anonymous questions. You feel free to participate, and it's just a way to get you guys engaged. And so, in which city do you think Monet was born? He said that he was a Parisian of the Paris. He was born on 14th of November, 1840 in the 9th district, in a nice Haussmannian building on the 5th floor of 45 Rue Lafitte. And the following year, about 6 months old, he was baptized in the neighborhood church, Notre-Dame de la Lorette. So his parents are rather wealthy, well-off bourgeois class, both second-generation Parisians. His father was a grocer, and his mother, a stay-at-home housewife, very typical of this time. She had a passion for art. She was a trained soprano as well. And she loved to paint as well, write poetry in her free time. So I wonder if Monet actually get his artistic talent from the mother, you know. Well, we always undermine the importance of women in a household, right, to the artist. But I definitely think her mother's support was critical for Monet's artistic endeavor. When Monet was 5 years old, the family actually moved from Paris to a coastal city called Le Havre in Normandy. And his father had this business opportunity, so he went and started his nautical supply shop in this town of Le Havre. Le Havre looks quite different today from the Le Havre of Monet time, because World War II bombing has changed the look of the city, but it's just as charming as the rest of the resort towns in Normandy, like Trouville, Deauville, Honfleur, Etretat. So in the time of Monet. So this is where he spent the next 10, 12 years of happy childhood. Le Havre is on the beach, on the coast. So Monet was surrounded by nature, by the sea, by the cliffs and the sand dunes, and he loved to spend time frolicking in the sea, climbing the sand dunes, and just basically doing his own, doing everything that he really enjoyed outside. But this was a problem, right? He was enrolled, of course, in a school, even though the school had only 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. He found that those 4 hours in a day of his life was like a prison. He couldn't bring himself to school. So he often skipped schools, and he would just be outside and playing. And even when he did go to school, he would basically kill his time by drawing caricatures on the margins of his textbook. And he became quite known for his charcoal caricatures in the town. And people started to ask him to please draw caricatures of themselves. Well, he realized this was a really good opportunity. So he started to ask people for money. So at the beginning, he said, okay, well, if I like his face, I'll only ask for 10 francs. Well, if I don't like this man, I'll ask for 20 francs. And this business took off very quickly. He was getting 6 to 7 commissions on a daily basis. And he thought, well, he was just going to sell 20 francs for each of his caricatures. Why not? And this is how he started to actually save quite a lot of money for himself because of his success in this very fun caricatures. So he was so proud of his work and so well known that his work was actually displayed in an art supply shop, in the only art supply shop, in the only framer shop in Le Havre. And he felt immense pride for himself when people, gathered around by the window and started discussing his art and laughing at it. And he felt incredibly proud of his skill, basically to observe the characters of the people and summarize it, and in a way magnify these characters through his caricatures. So he basically felt that his entire childhood was one of freedom. He was undisciplinable. But this is when enters in his life, around 16 years old, a local landscape painter, Eugène Boudin. Eugène Boudin also frequented the same art supply shop in Le Havre. He also had his oil landscapes on display in the same window frame. And finally, one day, these two men met in the shop. And even though Monet was rather arrogant, let's say, at this time, 15, 16 years old, because of his success in caricatures, some of his caricatures would sell more than the painting of Boudin at that time. So he didn't really pay much attention to the advice of this man. Well, Boudin saw quite serious talent in his caricature and convinced Monet to be serious with his talent, to learn to draw well and appreciate the sky, the light and the blue sky. And most importantly, Boudin encouraged Monet to leave his charcoal work at home and go outdoors, be in plein air, to record what he was seeing. And it was really Boudin's advice that changed Monet. One day he decided he was going to give it a try in the summertime because it's a holiday time. So he started joining Boudin for these outdoor painting sections. And this is when he really fell in love with painting outdoors. So he thought he needed to do this seriously to make a living out of it. So while you cannot really become a serious painter, right, by yourself, only in Le Havre. Where would you go? Of course, the capital of art at that time is Paris. So he goes to Paris and then he starts to visit the Louvre, and then he starts to be introduced to different artists through the family connection and Boudin's connection. And he starts to take some lessons as well. So, and one of the earliest, his earliest oil painting, as you see, produced when he was 18 years old in 1855, is this very traditional landscape, this landscape, the view at Ruelle and Le Havre. It looks very polished and very much touched with detail and refined. And this period didn't last very long, because when he turned 20, this is the time to be drafted into the French army. Well, France had this system of a ballot system. So everyone's name would be entered into the system. But if your family is wealthy enough, they can spend about 1,000 francs to buy you out of the 7 years military service. His parents definitely had the money. Oh, by the way, his mother had already passed away when he was 16. So his father and his aunt actually supported him at that moment. They had the money to buy him out. But they didn't want to do that, because they thought by Monet turning 20 years old, it is time for Monet to realize that he should be done with his childish passion of drawing and painting, and he should take life seriously now, as men should do, right? And return to Le Havre and take over the family nautical shop business. That's what they wanted him to do, really. But Monet said, well, I'd rather go into the 7-year military service than come and do something that I don't like. So he was drafted, and in June that year, in 1861, he joined the Zouaves army in Algeria in Africa. So a lot of people would, of course, find this period to be difficult, to be tedious. It was very hot. You had to go through lots of exercises and drills, and the sanitation wasn't very good. But to Monet, he actually quite enjoyed this period. He enjoyed seeing the exotic sun, the plants, and he said it's because of this period that really changed the way of him perceiving light. So, and he also admired the painters such as Eugène Delacroix, who also came to Morocco, who painted rather Oriental paintings. So he was hoping to be inspired from this time in Algeria, in North Africa too. But after only a year in his free time, he drew and sketched many of the exotic plants and landscapes as well. Unfortunately, none of those works survive to today. And you're looking at a portrait that was done by Charles, by another painter of Monet at this time. But he contracts typhoid fever, potentially because he was out drawing so often. So he, when he was hot, he started to maybe drink water that wasn't boiled. So he gets infected with typhoid fever only about a year into the service. So in 1862, he was shipped back home, and he was able to rest and recover for 6 months back at home in Le Havre. And during his time, the 6 months of recovery time, he was quite active again, often going out and painting on plein air. And this is when one day he was trying to paint cows grazing right on a farm, on a grassland, and he would get so frustrated that the cows would constantly move, and he would have to take his easels on one hand and take his stool on the other hand and chase after the cow, looking for a perspective to continue his painting. And this very funny behavior attracted an Englishman who was passing by him at that moment, and the Englishman said, well, don't worry, I'm going to help you. So the English guy went to the cow and started to drag the horns of the cow to sort of calm cow. So, and this is when these two men started to befriend each other. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I only see now your messages. I can see that most of you don't see the slides. Do you see the slides? You don't see anything different.
The only thing is the first slide that you put up, we haven't seen anything since the first slide.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Okay, let me have a look. Ooh, I guess my storytelling was not that bad. I mean, you guys, I didn't hear anything from you guys. So here earlier, but thank you for pointing this out.
You wanted us to be muted, so we were muted waiting for you.
Yes, this is a difficult situation. Let me see. How about now, guys? Let me see. How about now? Do you see anything? Do you see?
That's the first slide again. You just showed a slide of another man, of Johann. That's the slide
okay, that's
visible.
Right. If you see Johann now, do you see
Yes.
Johann and En Fleur by Johann?
Yes.
Excellent. That's the right one. So I have gone through about maybe 20 slides.
No, we only saw one.
Do you guys mind if I just quickly rewind and show you the slides? I hope. Yes, please, quick rewind. Okay, I'll do that.
That's fine. So, yeah, that'd be good.
That'll be good. Thank you. All right. So please do let me know if there's any technical issues. All right. So yes, this is the parents of Monet and the church where he was baptized in the 9th district. And Le Havre is about 3 hours drive from Paris and an hour and 15 minutes drive from Paris. The white dots that you see on the blue route would be Giverny, while the home of Monet for his second part of his life. So Le Havre was a bustling coastal port. And this is one of the most famous paintings that done by Monet 2 years before his first exhibition. So Impression of Sunrise at the port of Le Havre. And I was trying to show that it is a place filled with nature, with cliffs, and with sand dunes. And this is the place where Monet preferred to spend his time rather than being stuck at school feeling like a prisoner. And when he did go to school, he would make these caricatures and start selling them in the local framers shop. And to sum up, you already know that from a small child, he was never going to bend to a rule. He was never going to conform to the established norm. And his first real mentor, teacher, appeared in his life when he was 16, when these two artists met in the Boudin, in the framers shop. And because Monet took the advice of Boudin, that he started to treat his talent and he started to really do something about painting and came to Paris to learn from the great masters and also from schools. But this only lasted for 1 year because he contracted typhoid fever. And on the way back, when he came back to Le Havre to recover from the typhoid fever during those 6 months, this is when he met the second mentor, which would complete his education, especially observation, the way of observing by Jonkind. And I was just in the middle of recounting the story when Monet actually encountered Jonkind, because he was trying to paint a cow, right? He was trying to paint a cow, and the cow was moving, and his funny behavior of running around the cow with carrying his easel and the stool aroused the attention of an Englishman who was passing by. And because of this Englishman, he got actually introduced to Jonkind. And these two men, even though Jonkind was rather rather shy, and they got along very well. And for those 6 months together with Jonkin, with Boudin, with Monet, he felt that it was his real, this was the time that he really learned how to paint in the plein air. But that wasn't enough. So of course, to be recognized, to be successful, to go anywhere with art, you still need to be in Paris. You need to be recognized by the Academy, the state-sponsored salon that takes place once a year in Paris. And seeing how hard he was trying, even though he was recovering from his typhoid fever and so sick and weak, having fever often, his family saw how serious he was with painting. They finally gave in, right? So they made an arrangement with Monet that as long as he enrolls in a serious school, not going independent on his own, sometimes he would, befriend models and, and kind of go off the path, which to the family was a way to ruining their reputation. So they wanted Monet to be engaged in a serious school, and then they wanted to also receive report of his behavior from family connections in Paris, and they would then give Monet an allowance, a monthly allowance to support himself. So by this time, he's pretty much done with those 2,000 francs of saving that he had gained from selling his caricatures. So this is when he comes eventually to a studio run by Charles Glaire for only 10 francs a month. The students here would be able to chip in their money and hire models and freely use the studio, as early as 5 a.m. or as late as 11 p.m. They are free to come and go here. And it is here that Monet befriended friends that they would support each other throughout the rest of their careers. So these are Renoir from the left, and Sisley, an Englishman, Pissarro, slightly older than them, on the right of Monet, and finally Frederic Bazille. So, and these men shared a common vision of creating art that wasn't going to conform to this type of traditional art, these type of academic art. This was an example of these academic art that won prizes and was actually purchased by Emperor Napoleon III for his own private collection. Here you're looking at motifs, themes of ancient, from the Renaissance and from the classical period, right? Venus, or you would paint Virgin Mary, religious themes. And even when when it comes to figure painting, of course, it has to be very much idealized. You're looking at pure white color. There's no hair whatsoever on the body. It does not remind you that this is an actual possible physical body. And and it's this type of art that was winning the prizes of the salon. Well, Monet, at very beginning, he was about 23, 24, he still wanted to make him known through the traditional way. So through participating, submitting his artwork in the salon, to the salon, and being recognized by the whole world in a way. So you can see one of the earliest works that he submitted to the salon of 1864, 65 was this rather traditional seascape, landscape, the low point of Le Havre. So you're looking at the colors that's rather dark and rather detailed as well. You don't see dry, rough brush stroke. And this is when his family become quite proud. Well, because his name is mentioned in the salon, his work was selected, and they were like, okay, well, Monet is doing well, and they decided to continue their allowance so that Monet would make a bigger name for himself. But Monet, right, wasn't really set on this route. He wasn't going to just continue the traditional academic way, because there's one thing that he was deeply convinced from an early age. And this brings to my second poll question is, which one of the following do you think is the most famous contribution of Impressionists to painting? What do you think was the most insistent element for the Impressionists, right? Of course, the Impressionist wanted to capture real life under real lights with real with what the eyes can see, right? In real life, I mean, on plein air. And this is where that Monet started to go away from the path that was already set for him or for the rest of the painters, like Cézanne on the left, like Pissarro on the right, like Renoir, right? They started to go to the woods, right? This wooded area, this village called Barbizon. Generations before them, French painter has already started painting on site, and he would also go to Fontainebleau. And this is where in 65, from 65, he had this ambition to prove himself as an outdoors painter to the academy, to the salon, that he had planned a humongous painting. The painting would be 4.5 meters tall, right? Again, I don't know how long it would be originally. It looks like at least 8 meters long, and real size figures being painted. And you see, what you see here is only an oil study that he had done in the woods of Fontainebleau, in situ, with his friends posing for him. It's a small one. It's in the Pushkin Museum in Russia. But he would take this oil study that he had done outdoors and work in his studio, right? And so this was his actual work, which unfortunately did not survive today, because later on in the next couple of years, he would become so poor that he would be evicted from his homes. And some of his work he wasn't able to rescue, and they would be taken by the landowners or creditors. And some of them went into ruin. And this one, for example, the Lunch on the Grass work, it was taken from him. And about 20 years later, he was finally able to regain them. But by the time he got these paintings back, the surrounding areas, the ones that's in gray, that have all rotted and they have moist going on it. So he had to emulate, basically, to save his painting, to cut them off. So what is remaining today is in the Orsay Museum. And so this lesson, right, in the end, he wasn't able to finish this monumental size painting for the 66 Salon. And he realized that if he was going to continue painting outdoors, he will have to be less ambitious about the size of canvas, that he was going to work on 12 life-size figures, right, 4 by 8 meter size. It's going to take months to complete. And we're very quickly, in order to submit something for the 1866 Salon, he decided to turn his attention to a portrait. And this is when my third question comes. So who do you think is this model for the portrait that he executed? Well, according to Monet, he said he finished this portrait within 4 days. It's an oil painting in 4 days, because he was really hurrying, right, catching the deadline to submit his painting to the Salon. In the end, it probably take a little bit longer than that, but Monet, he's very quite smart as well in self-marketing, right? And a couple of white lies doesn't help, it doesn't hurt. And this is when we meet, introducing the muse, the girlfriend, the model, and later on the wife of Monet, Camille Dancy. So Camille, at this time, the mother of Monet had already passed away for many years. When Monet was 16, his mother passed away. And his aunt, who often supported him throughout his life, lives in Le Havre, in Normandy. And here in Paris, he meets, probably through Basile, this model called Camille Dancy. Camille Dancy was 7 years younger than Monet. She was about 18 years old at this time, when Monet was 25 years old. And very quickly, they develop a romantic relationship, which is going to be troublesome, because this model girl, was not the type of future wife that Monet's family envisioned for him. But you can see from this, again, life-size portrait, Monet's fascination of fabrics, well, this is more of a painting of the dress rather than the face of the model here. Monet himself was quite a dandy. He often wore very tailor-made suits, and all his cuffs had laces around. He also had his names monogrammed on his shirts, and this is a way to show you that Monet, throughout his life, whenever he actually had money, he wouldn't be able to keep it because he was a big spender, right? He loved parties and good food and good clothes as well. And a picture of Monet and Camille. So and his Woman in a Green Dress of Camille was a big success in the Salon, and this painting was actually sold later on for 800 francs, which is a great sum for an unknown artist starting out so early, only 25 years old. Once again, you see that had he wanted to go the traditional way, the path that every other artist took before him, he would have succeeded. Long time ago, he would have made paintings and sold them. But he wasn't content in this way. Well, as he said, he never wanted to bend to the rules. Well, soon after the Woman in a Dress painting, he started on another monumental size painting. So when I say monumental size, it means that these large canvases are dedicated to important, significant historical events, a great battle of history, a myth, or coronation of the emperors, and so on and so forth, because these are considered worthy of dedicating your canvases for. Right? Monet, however, he only wanted to paint everyday life scenes that's relevant to his life rather than ancients that lived thousands of years before him. So he tries a second project of painting outdoors on plein air. This comes more or less like a challenge, a dare between Monet and Frederic Bazille, because both of them are interested in learning how to paint outdoors, how to observe the light, and how to realize it on canvases. So they wanted to both challenge each other and see if they can complete a monumental size painting completely outdoors. So this was his second attempt, and he was quite successful in it. Camille had to model for him. 4 of these women figures are all from Camille in different dresses. And in order to complete this big canvas, he had to dug trenches in the garden. And he had to dug trenches, and he had a pulley system attached to the canvas, so he would be able to move the canvas up and down, left and right. And when he was painting, he had to wear hats because that's the direct sunlight would be very damaging, both to the way you see your work and also the color value on the canvas. So it looks very sweet and relaxing to us, but in real life, painting outdoors, especially right with Monet's dedication of painting on sunny days, it is not an easy job at all. But he succeeds in The Woman in the Garden, and this painting, by the way, eventually was purchased by Frederic Bazille in a way to support Monet. Yeah, so let me, well, of course, other situations in nature can get even more difficult, like this painting that he executed in 1869 of a lone magpie resting on the fences. And I would like to ask you, what do you think is the color of the shadow that he had captured because of the snow, right? Let me know what you think in the chat. And this is also a time that I can catch up with your comments. Blue. Many of you think blue. Yes, purple, sort of lavender color, right? And well, the art critics at this time thought Monet was mad that he wasn't giving the shadow its proper black color, but a purple or lavender or bluish color. And you can see another example from his haystack later on. You see similar blue color here. But of course, it depends on the light itself. It's early in the morning, the shadow would be more purple. If it's late at sunset, the shadow would be a little bit more green. So it's never black. And Monet was very true to his observation. So he wanted to paint things that he can only see, but not theorize, right? While his figure painting was speaking the same things. He was being criticized in his studio by Charles Glare that his figure were not idealized enough. Well, they were too ugly, or they were not the right proportion. Right? So, but in what Monet was trying to do is to paint exactly how he sees it. So this is another example of how painting outdoors can even be dangerous, right? So A Storming Sea by Monet in Etretat, 1883. So the story goes that he went into this very isolated beach strand, his favorite place where he was never going to be disturbed by anyone, and he had a really nice perspective as well. And he was so engrossed in his painting, and he forgot about the tide. And by the time the tide swept in, he had completely been trapped there on rocks, and all of his supplies, his tools and canvases, paint brushes and tubes, everything was washed away, and he himself was nearly also washed to the sea. But luckily, some fishermen came to his rescue, and he was able to go home completely soaked and nearly died. And this just to show you that how Monet is so focused in in his observation, in his execution, that he really can. This was his way to, in a way, to escape life later on. And just a closer look of this painting, right? And even though these images, look to us quite dreamy, quite sweet, and very positive, definitely, and very enjoyable to look at. But when you look at the details of his brushstroke, right, it is crazy. It is madness, right? Who has painted with such broad, overlapping, right, colors in such a way? So the Impressionism, as we see it, is really a revolution of its time. But why is it exactly the reason the Impressionism is taking place in the 19th century, in the 1860s and 70s? And it was a very short-lived artistic movement. It lasted no more than about 20 years. So what technical inventions at this time enabled the birth of Impressionism? So, well, there should be a fourth answer to this poll question, which is all of them. So I think I neglected that one. So it should be all of these technical inventions. Well, before the in the old times, before the mid 1800s, artists used to have to grind, have to prepare, have to manufacture their own pigment. So they would take minerals or plants, and they would have to grind them, and they would mix it with linseed oil, with olive oil, depends, and with the leftover of those fresh pigments, they would have to store it in pig's bladder, as you see. And it's really clumsy to carry them around. Imagine that you wanted to go, you would have to carry a dozen of different pig bladders, which wasn't very secure, and it dries quite easily as well. So it was in 1841, thanks to an American painter by the name John Rand, who was actually painting in London at this time. So he invented the first tin portable paint tubes. And this went quickly into manufacture. And by the time Impressionism came along, right, this was commercial print, commercial colors that you can easily purchase. And also you had fresh greens and reds that was not available before. And all of these advances in chemistry and technology enabled new colors and easier access to paint tubes. And at the same time, we have a revolution, breakthrough in the type of brush brushes that was being produced as well. So the Renaissance painters like Michelangelo, Raphael, and of course, Da Vinci, they preferred this Kolinsky sable paintbrush. It comes from those sable that lives in Siberia with very soft hair, and they are able, they don't take up too much paint in themselves, and because of the softness of the hair, they slowly release the paint strand by strand, enabling the painter to work on small areas very refined way. And now, in the mid-1800s, a new animal friend, the hogs, bring their hair, their bristles, to this painting world. And their bristles are rougher and they're harder. They split at the end naturally, which means they're able to grab more paint, and they're able to release the amount of paint very quickly as well. So imagine an Impressionist painter being outdoors, would able to cover the entire canvas much quicker with this type of hog's bristle brush. Also, the invention of a furrow, because of the Industrial Revolution, now we have metal replacing this manually bound hair. And also, apart from having a round brush, you are able to have this flat brush. And the flatness is what you usually see on the brushstrokes of the Impressionist painters, right? Because of train engines as well, right? You are able to travel from Paris to Le Havre, even return on the same day. It's about 2.5 hours a journey. And this took the Impressionists to the countryside very easily, from Paris to Fontainebleau, to Barbizon, to those beautiful sites like Argenteuil, later on to Paris. And because of these the trains and the locomotions and the train station, the symbol of this modernity of the Industrial Revolution life, that Monet wanted to portray, you know, what it's like to living here in the modern world. So he actually wanted to paint the train station of Gare Saint-Lazare. Well, less of the train station, but more like the effect of the light through the smog of the train station, being trapped under the glass awning. And he came to the train station and asking for the director, right? The director was very reluctant, even speaking to Claude Monet. You know, he wasn't an art person. He wasn't interested in this proposal. And Monet says, you know, I wanted to explore, paint your train station. And then sensing that the director wasn't so interested, Monet then got up, getting ready to leave, but turning very cleverly, right? So saying to the director that, Monsieur Director, I was actually visiting the other train station this morning, Gare du Nord, and the director was very enthusiastic about my project. You know what? I can't really quite decide whether I should paint your station or the Gare du Nord station, right? Well, this is what won the right for Monet to paint the Gare Saint-Lazare. And he came back a couple of times, and the trains would be stopped for him, but the workers would keep adding the coals, and so that they would continue to produce smoke. And that's what Monet wanted. He wanted to see the colors changing through the smoky train station. And he had done about 5 of those train station paintings. And now, one last deciding element for the birth of Impressionism is actually the invention of photography. A Frenchman, Louis Daguerre, invented the Daguerre-type camera, and you are seeing the first landscape picture produced by Louis Daguerre in 1837. So you actually see he took this photo from his studio. He's a painter himself, by the way. On the bridge, on the oldest bridge in Paris, Pont Neuf, and you see the Louvre on the right-hand side, but you don't see the Eiffel Tower yet. The Eiffel Tower wasn't being built. It will be built in a few decades later. And just have a look at the detail of this first black and white photograph of the landscape. And you can see a man who's taking a nap by the fence of the statue of Henry IV, and you can see so much detail that was not able to be captured by painting or never. So this is when painters start to really question themselves. Are they going to compete with machines, right? What is their purpose of painting? Are they still going to continue painting historical battles of Venuses and Virgin Marys like what the ancients have done for hundreds of years? Or are they going to try to be like a camera, right? Capturing life to the detail. Well, this is when Monet decided that he wanted to capture the truth of life, the essence of modern life, these everyday ordinary life that everyone was living through. So, and this is when Paris was also changing beyond the breaking net speed. It was under the rule of Napoleon III, Emperor Napoleon III, between 18. I'm just looking at a question from Lynn. Was Monet right or left-handed? As I understand it, he is right-handed, and the paintings aside, there are paintings. Yeah, he paints with his right hand, exactly. So yeah. So Paris was changing because Paris was being remade. The Paris that before Monet's time was a medieval Paris, winding streets, no sewer system, no gas lamps. But Napoleon wanted to remake Paris to be the new capital of the whole Europe. And his project manager was the city mayor of Paris, Eugene Haussmann. And within about 20 years, they have destroyed most of those wooden houses and built 35,000 new stone buildings with the same look. We call them the Haussmannian buildings. So just going back to see those Haussmannian buildings that's represented by Monet in the Boulevard des Capucines. And the streets were widened. There were gas lamps on the streets. There were sewer systems. There were arcades that's built so that people can go window shopping, right, in a safe place without mud or traffic. And you had more light coming into your room. And even the rooftops of those Haussmannian buildings were rounded in a way to allow more light to come into the streets and through your windows. So this was the new Paris with the boulevards and the vistas, with the monuments like Opera Garnier at the Boulevard Champs-Élysées, the Paris that we love so much. And this was the time that the new Paris was being born right in front of the eyes of the generation of Monet. So how could he not be excited about it and not be excited about capturing this new life, right? And he and Renoir, they had this mission, or the two of them were very often painting side by side in their early times, and they decided to go to this popular pastime place, this island, La Grenouille, where you had a bar, you had a spa, you had a boating concession, you had a stage for dancing, and you had so this was a very popular weekend hangout place. Even Emperor Napoleon III and his wife Eugenie came to visit. So they thought they would perhaps be able to find potential buyers of their paintings. And the two of them came and sat side by side. And I'm going to show you in just a moment how different, though, these two Impressionist painters look like, given the same perspective. So my next question is, was Monet successful in the first Impressionist exhibition of 1874? So why Monet had to, how did this come along, this exhibition of the Impressionists, right? So ever since the Women in the Green Dress, the paintings that he had produced and submitted to the Salon, they were all refused, they were all rejected. And now, after years of rejection and barely selling any of his paintings, he did sell some, but not for much either. And they were fed up, not just Monet, but also Basile, but also Renoir, Pissarro, even Degas and Manet. They all had this vision of having their own salon. So they would bypass the state-sponsored salon and they would have their own show so that they're able to they were able to show the world what they're doing, right? If you're not showing what you're doing, how can you be liked? So they decided to chip some money, and they had their friend Nada, who was a photographer, loaning their studio to exhibit for their works. About 30 artists come together with 165 paintings on display for 1 month time between April to May. And every painter who put, they all submitted a few 5 or 6 paintings for their work. And there was a catalog that was also made. So you're looking at the catalog where the names of their paintings and the painters were recorded. So this was the first exhibition that would change the history of art, the course of the history of art. Many people, about the 4,000 people who came, I mean, compared to the number of people who visited the Salon, right, this is nothing, right? Thousands would go on a daily basis in Salon, but only 4,000 came to visit for a month for their exhibition. And there was one critic whose comments now become history, because he said, focusing on one particular painting of Monet, the Impression of Sunrise of Le Rave, he said that, well, this painting is showing such freedom, such ease of workmanship of Monet. He felt that wallpaper in its early stages is much more finished than what he's seeing on this painting. And he's mocking that Monet was not capable of finishing his painting, but only creating an impression. An impression is like print. So you have got maybe a piece of paper, and you are trying to, for example, you have your palm and you have some color, you have some ink on it, and you press onto it. So you have this really vague pressing of your image onto the surface. And so this was such an insult, really, to say that these painters are not capable of finishing their work that looks even rougher than wallpapers. And some even go as far as to say it looks like a monkey who jumped onto the canvas and knocked over oil bottles and splashing it all over. And they're not even dry, and they're on display. So this is what really coined the movement itself. They really didn't choose a name for their group. And after seeing this review, right, they actually thought, yes, why not? We are the Impressionists. We like to make impressions. And Monet, well, of course, says that he has never, he's always been an Impressionist in his heart. While he stays and becomes a hardcore, a main founder of the Impressionism, he also became a father. And his muse model, Camille, delivers their boy, Jean, in 1867. And about this period, it would become one of the 2 most difficult periods of Monet's life. The period where he was in poverty, where he wasn't selling, where the family went hungry, where there was no heating in the house, where they were evicted by their landlords, where they would have to pack in the middle of the night to avoid their possessions being taken away from them, to escape their creditors and landlords. And this was the time where he also had to abandon his girlfriend, Camille, who was pregnant and about to deliver any day, but to go home to try to pretend to his parents that he has ended this relationship with Camille, to continue receiving that allowance and sending Camille whatever money he had from his family, or whatever money he was making by painting seascapes to sell in Le Rave. And this is when, well, life becomes so unbearable for Monet that even in 1868, soon after the birth of his son, Jean, that he saw no end to this, and he went on a bridge in Paris, and he jumped off the bridge into the River Seine. He attempted suicide to escape from all of this, and luckily he was saved. And he returned and continued on painting. He regained his passion very quickly onwards, and he carried on, right? So, but this was really perhaps the darkest time in his life. So, just a reminder here that I think I'm hearing a little bit of a background noise. So, if any of you still have your sound on? So please turn it off, and see if I can do something here. If I can do something here to turn off your sound. I think we have someone called Pat Anderson, maybe? Is it? If you can hear me, Pat, for some reason that your audio is coming in. Your audio is coming. I don't know who it is really, but whoever it is, I can't see it. Please.
Hi,
yeah?
I'm Pat Anderson.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yes, I'm so sorry. It's saying that my microphone right now, it's unmuted, but I had muted it. I'll try muting it again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I know that happens. That does happen. Yes, please go ahead if you notice that it has come back. So yeah. Okay, let's continue. So Monet never really gave up, and throughout those poverty, yeah, yes. Okay, maybe someone can help me here. There must be a way that I can turn off the participants' sound, right? There must be a way. Let me see. No. Is it Alice now? Is there a way that I can, let me see.
Hey there, just joined.
Oh, okay. Somebody just joined. For those of you who just joined, please turn off your audio so that the background noise would not come and interfere the presentation. All right.
Here. We're Anita.
Did you just start?
Oh, Lord.
I don't know how I can do that on my end to turn off. I cannot at this moment. If I can go to the participants list. Okay. Yes. I go to the participants list. Oh, yes. Thank you. And I will now mute. It's already muted. It's already muted. And now I will mute. Okay, I found you. Yeah, I think right now everyone is muted. Thank you so much for that tip, Karen. Great. Not so great with Zoom. Anyway, where I was. Oh yeah, so he kept painting, and one thing that definitely inspired him over and over again was my next poll question. What do you think? Ballerinas, nudes for figure paintings, or this magical thing that it fills the earth for 70% of our services? Yes, it is water, right? It is this water, element of water, that Monet was most fascinated about. You can see this from his childhood. He was raised by the sea, right? And it is the water that really brought his first brought nature close to him. So he grew up at the coast, and this is where his family would vacation, right? This very nice resort town, very close to Le Havre. And you're looking at all the figures, actually his family members. The ones who are seated on the right is his father and its aunt on the left-hand side. And further back, closer to the fence, the lady is his cousin, and the man, I'm not sure who it is. But this is where, whenever the family goes on vacation, they would spend it next to the water. And this is where he took his first honeymoon. Eventually, when he marries Camille in 1870, after the civil ceremony, so they go and spend their honeymoon in the resort town of Trouville in Normandy as well. This is where he goes and spends his second vacation, second honeymoon, with his second wife, Alice, in Venice, which I will talk about later. And when he takes vacation himself later on in his life, when he becomes wealthier, he comes back to these beach towns, Trouville, and this is his second wife and one of his daughters, one of his stepdaughters as well. So you see, the places that was painted most by Monet, you can see, right, from Le Havre, Sainte-Adresse, Étretat, Rouen, Paris, Giverny, London, all of these places you see water. And when he was an expat in London, for example, that's what he painted as well, the port of London and the Thames below Westminster. So why did he go to London, right? He was actually spending his honeymoon and with his son, with his son John. So the three of them were spending honeymoon in Trouville, and they were even joined by his mentor Boudon and his wife. And at this time, France actually was invaded, right, by Prussia, and then most of his painter friends who were in Paris decided to actually enlist themselves. They went to war, and this is when Frederick Bazille went to war and become one of a member in the Zouave army, and actually where he dies because of action. And Manet became enrolled as the National Guard. Renoir also becomes a light cavalry. So many of the painters actually engage themselves in this defensive war effort. But Monet at this time had a son who was only 3-4 years old and newly married, and he managed to get a boat ticket to cross over the English Channel, and so he actually came to London. Later on, Pissarro, who's a bit older in their generation, also joined him. And it is here in London, these painters, they gathered and they supported each other, and they went to visit the museums. They saw the works of Turner, Constable, and all of these English painters. And the English painters' work, especially Turner and Constable, really also helped Monet to really clarify his own styles. And it is also in London that Monet had his first big breakthrough. Going back here, it is in London where he was introduced by a painter he actually admired, Daubigny, to an art dealer, a very prominent French art dealer by the name Paul Juan Durel. Paul Juan Durel had both galleries in London and Paris, and previously Monet wasn't even able to get an appointment with Paul Juan Durel, wasn't able to get his paintings to be sold through his galleries. But because they were all sort of refugees in London, and because of their situation, right, it was the sympathy of Daubigny who really allowed Monet to be introduced personally as a friend to Paul Juan Durel. And because of him, right, so Monet had the first big breakthrough. Immediately, he was able to sell a couple of paintings that he did in London to Paul, same for Pissarro. And later on, when he returned to Paris, and Paul would continuously and regularly purchase painting from them. If it weren't because of this art dealer, right, for his support for almost a decade long, right, the Impressionist painters would not have gone this far, this quick. This is where Monet returned later on in his life, you see 1900s, back to London to paint more effects of the smog that was very unique in London, right? That's not the same in Le Havre or in Paris. So, and when he went to live for a brief moment in Holland, in the city not Amsterdam, but Zaandam. So this is where he also painted the water. And there's a funny story, and it's an important story here that happened in Zaandam here. Who died? Bazille died, Frederick Bazille. And Frederick Bazille, the one who purchased the Four Women in the Garden painting, the one who also supported Monet throughout his difficult times. And Basile, who comes from a wealthy family in Montpellier, was a medical student, but his true passion was painting. So his family gave him a quite comfortable allowance as long as he keeps studying in the medical school. And so with Basile's help, Monet was able to share a studio, and also with sometimes Renoir, who was living at home with his parents, right, through the most difficult time of Monet, where they had no heating, no food at all to eat, and being evicted from their own homes, right? Renoir would also bring the leftover from their home and to the family to eat. And so, but that was more of 1860s, 67, 68, for about a year or so. That was really difficult, and he was supported by Renoir and Basile. So here in Zaandam, when Monet went to shop for grocery, coffee and stuff, and he was surprised to go home to discover that his coffee was wrapped in very colorful prints. These were Japanese prints, and we're going to come back and talk about Japanese prints, but it is here that through simply buying grocery that was imported from Asia, that he got in touch with these very important Japanese prints that he fell in love and he collected, that inspired him. So he would go back to Amsterdam later on, again, when he settled in Giverny, to paint the tulips, because the first time he went, it wasn't the season for tulips, so he completely missed it. But this time he went back to paint the tulips. So he was so fascinated about water, he thought he needed to get closer to water. He needed to be right on top of it to paint from different perspectives, not just from the banks, right, but from right on top of it. So by 1874, 3 years after the Franco-Prussian War, he returned already to Paris, and this time, because of the support of the art dealer Juan Duel, he was able to rent a house with a garden in the nearby Argenteuil, and he converted a boat into a studio. So this is a boat studio that he painted himself, and Manet came to see him and then painted this picture here to show how it was like Monet was working. I think I'm hearing echo again, so maybe one of you, let me use the same advice. Okay, here we go. I got it this time. See, I'm learning. Where was I? Yeah, okay, so Manet painted Monet working on the boat studio, and you can see how accompanying Monet, right, not really in his painting, but just keeping Monet accompany, was his wife, Camille. So Camille would feed him while he's painting, would sing for him, would keep him entertained. And this is, I think, in my opinion, perhaps around this time, early 1870s, would be the simplest and maybe most enjoyable time of Monet's life, because things will get more complicated for him in terms of his family relations. And that shows you that how fascinated he was about water, and particularly about River Seine, right, the second longest river in France. He says he's painted the Seine throughout his time, right? At every hour, every season, he's never tired of it, because every time he paints it, it's always new, it's always different light, it's always different reflections. So just to give you an idea, well, he painted Seine from everywhere. This is the Seine from Paris in 1875, the mouth of the Seine on Fleur, 68.5, and Seine at the city Rouen, where he will return to paint the cathedral later on, and the Seine at Argenteuil. And of course, he's done more than 2,000 paintings. We can't survey them all, but so these are some of my favorite and the most well-known masterpieces. Okay, coming back to capturing this fleeting moment, this happy joie de vivre of this modern life. I was saying that Monet and Renoir, they often accompanied each other. They would go to the woods of Fontainebleau, and they would come to La Grenouille to paint this leisure life. And they set up easels side by side, and exactly the same perspective, right? The same scene, but they produced quite different paintings, isn't it? Right? So So on the left is Monet, on the right is Renoir. And so what do you think? What are the differences to you? Okay, now I can take a break and have a look at your comments.
Monet has so much more blue.
Oh,
and
there you go,
Renoir,
Christine.
yeah, and Renoir has a lot more grace. I like Monet's better. I love the blue.
Yes, you like the blue in the water, for example, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So his color is more vibrant in a way, is more sharp, is stronger, right? Yes, I also read from your comments, Jeanette, that Renoir is more realistic. Absolutely, I agree with you, because it's more detailed, it's more descriptive, right? And Monet is a distant scene, yes, from Marie. Yes, you're right, Marie. It feels like it's more distant because it's more blurred, isn't it? And I see also Andy commenting about light. Yes, the light quality of Monet here is much more bristle, right? It's yes, there are more boats. Monet more romantic by Terence, and it's brighter. Exactly, it's happier. Yes, so I can see that you guys are all maybe more of a fan of Monet, right? Concerning this pair of painting. So let's have a closer look at what the differences are, right? Monet focuses on the color itself. He's using pure color. He's not mixing his color anymore at this time. So he's not tuning out the exact tone on the palette, but he's just mixing the pure colors side by side. You see the pure green with the white, right, and the blue and the yellow, and this he's leaving the job to our eyes, to our natural function, that when we see colors side by side, we perceive a sensation, right? And compared to Renoir as well, Renoir, it has much more attention to the form itself. You can see the shapes of the leaf is much more detailed and accurate than what Monet is doing. Monet is giving you dabs of color, right? Not much accurate in, not so much accurate in form. And let's compare the figures as well. So you see the same thing going on with Monet. They're like match figures, right? Renoir, however, you see the details of the dresses. You see the ear of the little puppy on the floor, and one more. So, but this shows you that even among those group of people who call themselves Impressionists, there is really big differences. So Monet's cataract seems to be starting, Karen. Well, I'm not sure if it was starting here. I think it really started in his 60s and 70s, more like his 70s. And so that really gave him a lot of trouble. So if it was starting, I don't think he was much affected. I don't think it was actually affecting him at this moment, the cataracts problem, right? So, but he was only in his late 20s at this moment. Well, it's really showing that the artistic goal for Monet is to, as he said it perfectly, to try to forget what objects you have before you, whether it's a tree or house or field, right? Rather, just think about what comes into your eye. So the little square of blue, a little here, an oblong of pink, a streak of yellow, and paint it just as it looks to you, the exact color and shape, until it gives your own naive impression of the scene before you. Therefore, it really explains his attention to the light quality and the roughness of his brushwork. So because the Seine was such a source of his finest paintings, of course, he also settled his family whenever possible along the Seine. So how many homes do you think Monet has along the Seine River here? So Monet had at least 5 of them, right? 3 of them are rather well-known and permanent. They are Argenteuil and later on Viteuil and Giverny, of course. But there are also other places where he used as a transitional place, where he was basically going for cheaper rent or avoiding his creditors. So, and he had about at least 5 And as I was saying, the happiest one is, I think, this first one at Argenteuil. It's about 1830, 1870, 1872 or 3 that he brought his family here. And you're looking at his first wife, Camille and Jean, posing twice for Monet, right? And the poppies, wild poppies here, perfect example of the dabs of red and orange. And we have, again, Camille with their son, Jean. And this is when Manet, who happens to be vacationing in his family, with his family in a nearby place called Genevieve. So this is when Manet often came to visit Monet during his vacation time. And Manet paints Monet's family, Monet on the left and Camille and Jean here. The story goes that one day, just as Manet arrived and started setting up his easels and paint the Monet family here, the one that you're looking at, Renoir arrives as well, and so asking for easel and paint supplies. He also started work of the couple here. So these painters often also paint each other whenever opportunity arrives. And the second home that was quite well known is at Vitry. This is actually when Monet's first wife Camille had already passed away. So the third one is definitely the most famous one at Giverny from 83. And so now, what do you think if Monet wasn't affected by the academy, by the rules, right? So what really actually influenced Monet then? What was the reason, what really inspired Monet for his development, for his personal style? Here I'm coming up with this poll question here. Well, the answer is, well, actually, my question is which one of the following was not likely an area of influence on Monet's personal style? It is not an area of influence. Would be the first one, classical Roman mythology, that he was not interested in. The rest was all positive influences, painting outdoors and painting gardens, flowers, nature. And one last element that may sometimes be overlooked is the Japanese art. Remember when he was living very briefly in Zadam, when he went grocery shopping and he came back home discovering his coffee was packed with Japanese prints such as this one, right? So this one by an artist called, well, this type of prints was folk art in Japan, usually representing everyday pleasures like geishas or pleasure houses. And this very elongated form of representation, right, also inspired Monet to paint Camille as well, dressed in a rented kimono. And just to make fun of the fact that the Japanese art was very popular, that in France, everybody is quite after it, including Van Gogh and Manet. So he deliberately asked Camille to wear a blonde, because Camille's her hair was actually black, so she wore this blonde wig just to show you that she wasn't Japanese. She is this white Westerner, you know, dressed in his kimono outfit painted by Monet. And one more artist that influenced Monet is Hokusai, this great wave of Kanagawa. And believe it or not, Monet actually attempted to emulate the great waves that he's seen, this very bold colors, you see, this very bold colors of pure white and pure blue, right next to each other without any toning between them. And he produced one of these great waves breaking, right, in 8081 as well. And one last thing, which I think probably was the most influential factor for Monet from Japanese art, is the fact that they often produced many different views of the same subject. In this case, we're looking at Hokusai, who's done 36 views over Mount Fuji. So you're looking at Mount Fuji, right, behind the great waves, behind the trees, right? So from 36 complete different views, that gives you 36 complete different appreciations of Mount Fuji here. And this is something that Monet definitely was very keen on, and he started doing his own series very quickly, right? And which one of them do you think, this is supposed to be my poll question number 9, which one of the subject do you think he didn't paint in series? He painted a lot of things in series. So he painted the most famous, the water lilies, right? This is in the Orangerie Museum in Paris, which we'll talk a little bit more later. He painted the Rouen Cathedral, right? This is when he was rather established and wealthy. He rented an inn on the opposite side of the cathedral, and he would set up a dozen of easels and trying to capture the air, the light at different moments of the day, and he would paint about 30 plus of them. And now he also painted poplars. So this is when he was settled in Giverny as well, and he started the poplar series from the fields of one of his neighbors, and he learned that it was going to be cut down, so he actually hurried and bought this piece of land so that he would be able to continue finishing his poplar series. After he was done, the land was sold and trees were cut. He also worked on haystacks. All of these are very close by Giverny, the poplars, the haystacks. And the story of painting haystack is that at this time, Monet, even though he was established and he was wealthy already, he wasn't exactly very popular among the villagers themselves, because they still saw Monet as rather an alien character, living with a second wife, living with a woman that he hasn't married yet, with 2 households combined. And he was rather behaving really unconventional, as you probably can figure. You know, Monet never really chose the most traditional route for his life. He became a father before his marriage. He you know, and then so on and so forth. So he actually was not very welcomed in the fields of the haystacks. So the peasants of Giverny demanded Monet to pay a fee each time he goes to paint the haystacks. And this is when he went back to London to paint the House of Parliament. And by this time, once again, the series work was done when he was rather established, wasn't trying to make work that sold to pay for his bread, but he was free to experiment with his visions. And so this is why most of the series work, they are in the later life, in the second part of his life. And this time he was staying in a rather fancy, nice hotel called the Hotel de Savoie, where the window had a direct view of the River Thames and the House of Parliament. And this is also, very funny things happening on Zoom. We have a painter friend, John Sargent, who visits Monet at this time when he was painting the House of Parliament series. And John Sargent noted that in the hotel rooms of the Savoie, he saw as many as 90 different canvases that lying around the room of Monet. And whenever he sees a similar effect, the light effect returns, he would frantically search for the canvas that he had already started. And by the time usually he finds the correct canvas and hoping to continue finishing the effect, the fleeting effect itself had already passed and moved on. So you see, it's really quite an agony, isn't it, to trying to capture all of this. So this, let me see. Okay, there you go, gone. Can you imagine the agony of trying to capture this light that's changing any few, I don't know, minutes maybe, right? So this is the gift of Monet, because he had this eye that we are so envious of. Now, coming back to the time of Argenteuil, and so this is when he start to sell a couple of paintings here and then in Paris through Paul Rouanduel, and one collector, very wealthy owner of a department store in Paris by the name Ernest Rochette, and his wife Alice Rochette became patrons, very important patrons of Monet in around 1876. Not only they purchased paintings of Monet, but they also contacted Monet through their dealer Paul Rouanduel that they wanted to commission Monet to paint some paintings decorating their gazebo in their own castle, in their mansion, right? And this is when Monet actually lived with the family Rochette for some months, painting their castle, they picked turkeys, and this is when possibly being away from home and a little bit adrift from his first wife Camille, that he possibly have started a relationship, a romantic relationship with Alice, and the husband Ernest was often not home, and Alice with her 5 children would be here, and possibly it is here that Monet had a relationship with Alice, and Alice became pregnant soon after Monet finished his commission. And it is commented that the last son by Alice, called Jean-Pierre, resembles very much Monet, but we will not find out the fact whether it's Monet's son or not. We do have one letter from Monet himself addressed to Alice years later, commenting about the 2 sons, the son that Alice had, saying our little cute ones, and so seems to hinting that it is actually the blood of Monet. So, and it's this time that things start to get really complicated for Monet, both financially, emotionally, and domestically, housewife-wise. So what happened was that while he was finishing his commission for the Rochette family, well, Camille becomes pregnant with their second son, eventually, Michel. And after the delivery of the second son, Michel, Camille starts to get really sick. And within the next year, her illness would deteriorate. We're not sure whether she really suffered from cancer or maybe some aftermath of bad abortions. We're not too sure what happened there. But Camille eventually died on September the 5th. And just 5 days before her death, she actually asked Monet to summon a priest to sanction their marriage, because they were married in a civil ceremony, and she was quite worried that she would not have space, her place in heaven if her marriage wasn't sanctioned. And soon after this visit by the priest, 5 days later, Camille died on her bed. And Monet, at this moment, realizing he couldn't resist, to an extent that he found himself at the deathbed of a woman who had been and still was very dear to him. And he caught himself in the act of focusing on her temples and automatically analyzing the succession of the graded colors which death was imposing on her motionless face. So, and this is also the time where the Rochette family went complete bankruptcy, lost everything, their house, their business, all their possessions, their art collections, all of their paintings, including Monet's work, they had been sold in auction. One work that was sold in auction, a work of Monet, was even made fun of. The auctioneer deliberately hanged his painting upside down, seeming to say that you can't really tell, how his work is supposed to be seen. And because of the bankruptcy of this family, and possibly because of their romantic relationship with Alice, Monet and Camille invites the Rochette family with their 6 children to come and live with them. And this is when you had 2 women in the house with Monet, while Ernest, the bankrupt husband, actually runs away from his family, even not paying their share of the rent and food. And he runs away to Belgium and later gets a job in Paris and decided never actually to come and support his family anymore. And in Alice, however, stays on, and eventually they will be married. And so this is when we come to the second part of my tour. I do realize that I am going quite over time as I expected. So let me, anyway, if you are able to stay, I'm very happy. And let me show you a video of the house, of the gardens of Monet. Okay. Okay, here I wanted to show you the very famous water lily gardens. And then we will discuss how Monet would come around to develop his water lily gardens. It did not start at first. Are you able to see the video, guys?
Yeah, we've seen the video.
Okay, great. No audio?
The audio is on now.
Okay. All right, so a very bad connection, I imagine. the jerking is come from the bad connection. So, but don't worry, I will get it for you right now. The video that I found itself, it's not by me, but it's very detailed. Here is the link, guys. It's 30 minutes long itself. It actually covers the entire property, the flower garden as well as the water lily garden. But I decided to show you like 3 minutes of this. And now let me go back to my, to my PowerPoint. So here. So now coming back to the year 1883, this is when Monet decided that the house that he was living in with this combined household, now with the first wife Camille gone, and the second woman in his life, Alice, who was still married to Ernest, but living with Monet's family and his own 2 young boys, by Camille, in this combined household. So altogether, you see, it's actually 10 of them, not counting servants. Well, they also had cook and maids and servants. And it was getting too big, so they needed desperately to find a new place. And Monet, one day, he was on the train along the Seine River, and at one point he spotted this hillside along the Seine, and he got off the train and went into this village called Giverny, has a conversation with a man at the bar, and finds out a presser, an apple cider presser, has just become available. And the carpenter who inherited this place is looking for people to rent it. Perfect. So he decides he was going to bring his household to this new place in Giverny, but he didn't really have the money at this point. He didn't even have the money to move, to pay for the lease, but he went ahead that day already, the day he got off the train, he already signed the leasing contract. And later on, it was Paul Ronduel who came and helped him and loaned him 4,300 francs for him to move and pay for the lease. And so when he first came to Giverny, he was only renting it. So it was a house to settle his family. And right outside the house, there is this garden area. And that's pretty much it. And for the first 3 years, really, he didn't do too much about his flowers. Why? Because he wasn't happy. He wasn't happy at Giverny, the city, the people, the village people, the very conventional, traditional village people in Giverny, a very small town, right? Only one main street, and you can't even. It's not even walking distance to the nearest train station, right? So they didn't feel very good about their new neighbor with this complicated, unconventional family setting. And with so many children, 8 of them running around the household, and he just had no peace to work. And there was no garden at the beginning either, right? So he was renting this apple cider presser, this home apple cider workshop. So he actually ran away again from his family for the first 3 years. He often took painting trips with Renoir. They went to paint in Italy. He himself went again. He very often went back to the coastal cities of Normandy again, and he did many of those trips away from his home, trying to paint and trying to sell those works. It was only from 3 years later, when he came to Giverny from 1886, that things to change for him. His painting has already become rather accepted by the public, and the sales of his painting was becoming steady. And he had the luxury to not have to travel and paint anymore, but he would actually settle at home. And this is when he decided that he was going to cultivate his own garden. So this was not his first garden. He already had a garden in Argenteuil, where he painted the sunflowers, for example. And this is when, though, he became much more dedicated. He would subscribe to magazines, and he would become close friends with other garden painters like Kaibo, who was also a big fan of horticulture. And this is when he started considering himself, you know, almost as a professional gardener. And he says beyond painting and gardening, he was good for nothing, right? So, and he did an excellent job, though, in two fields, both painting and gardening. So now here, moving on to see here. So now my question for you is, how many gardens do you think there really are at Monet's Giverny? For those of you who have visited, I wonder how many you saw. Most of you saw two, maybe, the flower gardens and the water lily gardens, which is separated by a road. In Monet's time, it was a tiny little train line, the road that separates the flower garden and Giverny garden. But in fact, there are actually three gardens. The third one that we don't get to visit today is the vegetable garden. The first garden the family really needed to cultivate was the garden that produced the carrots, aubergines, zucchinis, eggplants, where the family would keep their chicken, their hams, their ducks, right? And the garden that produced food, fresh, organic, local food for the big household. And so that's actually the first garden that the family dedicated their energy to. Today, this garden is not on the property of the Fondation Claude Monet. So it's actually on the other side of the village, right? And but this is also quite a gorgeous garden. There was an American art student in Paris in 65. I think I got the dates wrong. It cannot be 65. It must be later, 85. That when this American student called William Metcalf, he actually wrote to Monet because he must have heard of the gardens that Monet was cultivating in Giverny. So he wrote to Monet and said, "Can I please come and admire your garden and paint your garden?" Monet replied saying, "The only person who's allowed to paint my garden is myself, but you're welcome to come and paint my vegetable garden." So, and this is how we actually have William coming to paint Monet's vegetable gardens. And he was even invited by Monet afterwards to join him in his family, with his family, which is this pink house here, for lunch. And so as you see here, we don't see the vegetable gardens in the map. We see the flower garden that's attached to the property of the house, and then across the road on the other side where you see the lily ponds. So this is the flower garden and the pink house. And this, of course, was cultivated over the decades by Monet. And Monet later on hired 6 full-time gardeners, and also had to, of course, feed the gardeners, house the gardeners, right? And on top of his normal house staff, the cook, he had at least, I think, 3 cooks, and he had a butler, and so on and so forth. And of course, the second part of his life was a complete different story compared to the time that he jumped off the bridge in Paris. What really changed for him, the question is, right? The change really started to occur around 1886 when his work was steadily selling, and he also started placing his paintings in a second art dealer's hands. And because of this competition as well, cleverly played by Monet, that his work starts to get a little bit more visibility and better sales. Well, with the money that he was getting, he invested, maybe something that you don't expect from Monet, in stock markets. So he played with his money quite well as well. And later on in the 1890s, he would receive several huge paychecks from commissions, from purchases. One paycheck was 1 million francs. It is said, according to some studies, 1 million francs from a Japanese industrialist who came and purchased 12 paintings from Monet. And just to give you in context of how much money he will be making from 1980s and then 1890s and onwards, where the average yearly salary of the Parisian at that time was about 1,000 francs. And he would actually sell some of his paint. Oh, someone is saying thanks to me. That's very cute. Thank you, thank you. I know I am way beyond my my time, so I do appreciate for those of you who are still staying on. And so I mean, I find it really hard to not share. So anyway, but thank you so much for your message, whoever it is. I didn't get to see your name, but coming back to what I was saying, that he from about 1980 he had about 43,000 francs of sales from his paintings, right? Not including his investment. And the Hope Diamond around that time changed hands for about similar price at this moment. And you see, he was really wealthy at this moment. And he dedicated himself, though, into cultivating his garden. He had very local plants, but he also had exotic plants that he would purchase from Egypt, from Africa, from Asia. So he was also enjoying breeding these plants, playing, experimenting with them. And he would also exchange the successful ones that he had bred with other horticulture enthusiasts. So, and just to give you idea of currently what type of flowers there is. So in the super, thank you, in the Garden of Monet. And here by 1900, so the garden was blossoming, right? It's impressive. We would never know exactly how his garden looked like because there was no good documentation, right? There was no documentation of before he started cultivating the garden and after he cultivated the garden. This was a living, breathing process. He lived there for 43 years and things must have been evolving throughout the time as well. So 10 years after he moves into Giverny, so by 1893, right? And he had already purchased the house. It was 22,000 francs paid over 3 years. Which is very affordable to Monet at that time. And a couple of years later, he decides that he wanted to build a complete new garden. And this new garden was going to be the water lily garden. So first he had to purchase the land across from the street, the road. And I realize I'm running out of time, but I would also love to show you the house of Monet. So what do you think, guys? Is anyone willing to
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go for it. Yes.
Go for it.
So I have all night here. Let's see. Okay, how do I do that? So I'm going to take you on a little virtual visit of his house. Now, my poll question was, what time do you think Monet gets up? I wanted to show you a little bit. So by the time he became wealthy, he purchased his house and he renovated it. He was very meticulous. He supervised the painting of the window shutters of his house. And everything was done according to his taste on the exterior. On the outside, the colors he chose it, right? But on the inside of the house, it was the domain of his second wife, Alice. Well, he would eventually marry Alice when his first runaway husband, Ernest, dies. So this is when Monet settles into a clockwork lifestyle, following a very strict schedule. And he would be most displeased if you, as a member of his family, did not respect the schedule. And I wanted to ask you, so what time do you think Monet actually usually gets up in the morning, right? So let's go and have a look at his bedroom. Do you guys see the outside of the house now? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great.
Yes.
And so here is the outside, and then this is where the main entrance would be. And we go upstairs. There's a bunch of rooms. There's like a dozen rooms that I'm not going to show you every room. I just want to first show you the room where Monet wakes up. So what do you guys think? What time does Monet wake up? He wakes up around 4 to 5 in this room. All right. This is the bedroom of Monet, and he would sleep here, and Alice had her own bedroom on the other side, right? So in his bedroom, you see hanging on the walls are the paintings of his friends. Cézanne, who himself is the greatest painter of them all. There is Manet. There is, let me just make this a bit faster. There is Manet, there is Degas, there is also, let me see if you guys recognize this one hanging directly above his head on the bed. The nude, the sweet nude, of course, is Renoir. And then there is Paris with the rain, with the umbrella. Anyone recognizes it? Let's see. Can you post the link to the interior of the house? Yes. The link is actually quite easy. If you just Google Foundation Claude Monet, right? So that's actually the official website. How beautiful. Once the museum reopened, can you visit? Karen, Kaiba, you're right. Effie as well. Gustav Kaiba, the painter friend who's also very interested in horticulture and painting on a studio boat, right? They share these common interests. So, so guys, just the link is, let me see. This is not a link, but if you just type this name, Foundation Claude Monet, it will, the first address that comes up is going to be this official website of Giverny. So the house and garden of Monet, which is the state owned. So it is the foundation of Claude Monet. And one of the things you can do on this webpage is to visit the virtual house of Monet. So, so yeah, so imagine this view when he looks out of his window, right? So this is the view of the garden, of his window. Every day when he wakes up between 4 to 5, it is still dark. Why does he wake up so early? Because he needed to have breakfast. He's usually done with breakfast, a very hearty breakfast, eggs, cheese, lots of coffee at 5:30. He would be done by 5:30. And he wanted to already be outside by the gardens, by the lily ponds before sunrise so that he can observe how the light was going to work out the day and contemplating, planning on what he was going to work on. So this is the day, how the day starts for him, very early, right, way before sunrise. And then, well, his day in the midday around 11:30, well, actually not around, exactly at 11:30, the bell from the dining room, the kitchen, would ring. And this is when the whole family would gather at the dining room. So beautiful colors, crimson yellow, complementing with the blue ceramics, the nice fancy plates reserved for guests. Right? And on the walls of the dining room, you had all those Japanese prints that inspired Monet, with the bold colors, with the weird cropping, with the raised horizontal lines, with all that bold perspective as well. So, so all of that hanging still these are replicas, not the original ones, on the walls of his dining room. So at 11:30, this is when the bells would call, and he would also entertain his guests, usually at lunchtime. And this is something that really pleased his guests. They were very admirers of the cooking of his cook, Marguerite, which is the wife of his butler. So Marguerite makes excellent suckling ducks, and Monet also had homemade plum brandy, which he usually served his guests after eating in the salon. And I'm just going to show you now where the cook, his favorite cook, Margaret, works, right? So in the kitchen here. Isn't it gorgeous? The blue tiles complementing with the yellow dining room right next to it. And it's got a very cute stove. And when this was set up in the 1980s, everything here was very avant-garde, very modern. And Monet even had water running in the taps. Do you see right on the stove? So there is actually water running, which was a luxury at that time. And so a lot of people had to even share water taps or even going into the river. So he had already water running inside his kitchen, 2 of them. So this is where Margaret would cook, right? And next door is the dining room. Monet was had a huge appetite. Well, lots of visitors commented that he eats quite a lot. Some even goes to say that he would eat everything in 4 portions, like 4 appetizers, like 4 servings of meat, like 4 salads, and so all of this. So look at these lovely copper pots, right? And again, the view from the kitchen facing the garden is quite amazing as well. It's a very spacious kitchen, isn't it? So that's, and after lunch, after lunch, he would entertain his guests, usually in the salon here. I'm going to show you the salon. The salon originally was used as a studio. When Monet first arrived in 1883, it was an indoor. It used to be originally, when he rented this place, it was a barn. So, and he used it as a studio in the early years, and where he would paint. Sometimes when the weather is horrible, when it's storming, when it's pouring down with rain, it is Normandy after all, right? He would be forced to paint inside. He would either retouch on his paintings or paint still life, like flowers in vases, or he's even painted a batch of eggs, right, in the basket as well. So these things that he could do indoors when the weather is too bad. And this is where he would read to his family in the evening, where his wife, a second wife, Alice, very much enjoyed spending time here in the salon. And on the walls of the salon, you see paintings done by Monet himself, the paintings that he never put up for sale. So the paintings that really meant a lot to him, representing a significant period, a moment in his life, and that he kept with him. Once again, the paintings that you see today when you visit his house are only replicas, because eventually, after all is done, right, these paintings were inherited by his second son, Michel. And when Michel died without any children, then this was donated to the state. And so the original ones, the Japanese prints, the paintings here and the paintings upstairs, they are all now in different museums in France. And many of them ended up in a museum called Marmottan Museum. So the original works collected by Monet, passed on to his son, donated to the state, Marmottan Museum. So this is where brandy and coffee is served, right, by Monet, right? Okay, so I think that's pretty much it that I want to show you in the house. Once again, you probably would spend, I would say half an hour, maybe, walking around his house when you visit. Here you go. I have the link. Right, this is the virtual visit link. Yes, Karen, you're right. Marmottan is the best for Monet works because it is the collection of Monet's work by himself, right? The ones that really meant a lot for him. And just last thing I will say is that you can see most of these work were hang without frames, which means that it was never supposed to be a showing room. Is just really an intimate place where he has his whole life displayed in front of him, really. So now let me go back to the presentation here. So once again, the same studio, black and white picture. And now going on to the water lily gardens. So a couple of years after he purchased the house and the flower garden, he wanted to do something else. So across the land, he purchased another piece of land that was completely uncultivated. I think somebody's trying to ask me a question now, maybe getting my attention. Let me see. Thank you so much. Oh, you're welcome. Which part of France is Marmottan in? No, Marmottan is actually a museum in Paris, by the way, Kelly. Marmottan Museum is a museum. It's in the, I think it's 16th or 17th district of Paris, right? Marmottan Museum. Actually, I have a question on that later on. Okay. What he wanted to do was to plant a different type of plants, aquatic plants, water lilies, lotuses, all of these mostly composed for the water lily ponds are aquatic plants, which means, once again, he wants to paint the water that surrounds the plants, right? And after purchasing the land, at this point, he was really wealthy and he started collecting. I'm sure I have meant for that poll question to come at a different time, but now here it is. But what do you think Monet started collecting when he became incredibly established and wealthy? He started collecting exactly, right, automobiles. He was very fond of speed. He had a few of those cars already early on. So by 1806, right, he had already 5 cars in his own garage, and he started receiving speeding tickets by the mayors of Giverny the year before that. Why? He had a second house, a studio built on the ground floor. So you would have the garage, the house that collected all his cars, and he also built rooms for his full-time gardeners. He has 6 of them. One, by the way, his full-time job on the daily basis was to go and clean the water in the lily water ponds and to take away the dust, brush the leaves of the water lilies and make the clean water shiny like a mirror. So the Monet wanted to really paint the light that's reflected through the water. So it has to be very clean and pure. So one gardener's job was to go around the pond all day and keep cleaning it. And so those gardeners had to be housed. And here, this is also the second studio that he had on the upper floor, where he had natural light that comes into his studio, better than the first one that was attached to the house, so lesser natural light. And this is also where he had a black room as well. He used photography to help him, especially later on with his grand murals, those grand water lily decorations that he produced for the orangerie as a gift for France. So all of these were housed in the second one, and he had his speeding ticket because the villagers in Giverny is complaining about how dangerous, how fast his cars was going. And so they figured they must have a law on this. They came up with the idea that if the car is going faster than a trotting horse, then it will be considered speeding. And since 1904, since this law, right, he had received quite a few speeding tickets. So by this time, into his 60s now, right, he has now already the flower garden blossoming. He has the land of the water lilies, where he started to really experiment. So where do you think all of these ideas come from for Monet? Why did he want to have water lilies and Japanese bridge, all of that? So, well, this came quite early on in his life because of the popularity of Japanese prints that a lot of people, a lot of prominent people, powerful people had already followed the fashion to build Japanese gardens in their own estate. And Monet was even invited to several of those, and to even invited to visit and paint those. He also visited the World's Fair of Paris, the World's Fairs where the Japanese had presented their culture and their technological advancement by building their pavilions and bringing their bonsai trees and so on and so forth. So it's through these cultural exhibitions, the World's Fair especially, that he was inspired with this the ideas of the garden. And where would he go and get all of that seeds? So, well, through the World's Fair, he got in contact with a nurseryman who has a garden in Bordeaux and called Maliac. Maliac was the one who supplied all of that seeds to Monet. And Monet had also needed water to feed his water lily ponds, right? So as I was saying, when he first purchased the land, this was all very this was just a patch of land. There was no water. So how do you think he managed the supply of water? What would be like the character of Monet? What would he do? Would he do things the conventional way, or, right? Of course, he would bend around the rules in order to fastly provide water. He actually stole a tributary of the River Seine called Apt, illegally diverted it just about 200 meters away to feed his water lilies. And the local villagers actually sued Monet at the court. He got out of it quite easily because he was a really good friend with the then president of France, Clemenceau. Right? And Clemenceau and the mayor of Giverny helped him obtain legal permission to divert the river. Well, because the villagers were really worried that the weird exotic aquatic plants was poisoning the water source of their livelihood, and so they were really worried about it. I was saying that Monet, right, purchased most of his seeds for the first order, at least in 1894, from this botanist, Latour Maliac. So for those of you who plans to go to Bordeaux, you should also check out Latour Maliac's own garden very close to Bordeaux. Beautiful garden. And it's a huge order, as you see, right? Very expensive because the seeds are also expensive. And he also purchased lotuses. You see at the very bottom of this list, there was lotuses. That shows you that not everything succeeded. The lotuses, for example, they just never worked out. And it really took him some time to understand the water lilies. He said he first cultivated them only for pleasure, without any thought of painting them. But then one day, he realized that this was the magic of his pond. And he took the palette. From that moment, he decided he needed to paint nothing else. And this is when the idea came for him in the 90s that he was going to have this space around oval space where he would have a series of water lily paintings surrounding the audience to create this immersive experience. But this idea he played around with it for quite a while, and especially after the end of World War One, around 1914, he decided to make it official, right? At the help with Clemenceau, through the help of Clemenceau, Monet agreed to donate these grand murals to the state of France as his gift to peace, to the country. And how many of those water lily paintings do you think Monet painted? Any idea? Let me see. Less than 50? More than 250? Now it's time to show you a footage of Monet painting.
You're muted now. No sound. Nothing from you either.
So we were saying that Monet actually painted about 250. In fact, there's more of them because he destroyed the ones that he was not happy with. He would take a knife and he would just, scratch them. He even stomped on them, even burned some of them. So he's I think about 50 of those canvases that he burned and destroyed because he was not happy. So the ones that survived is about 250 of them. And this is why, he spent nearly two decades to paint it. So here is a picture of Monet on a trip with Alice in 1908, where he also painted gorgeous views of the Canal of Venice. Why do I mention Alice in this trip? Because soon after this trip to Venice, a couple of years later, Alice would die and Monet would sink into a depression. This was about the beginning of the 1910s that Alice dies. Now he has lost his loyal companion, and then 3 years later, his oldest son by Camille, he's never had officially any children with Alice. Maybe the last one from Alice is actually his blood, but we don't count that. So his own son by Camille, the first one, John, also dies. So for those very difficult 3 years between 1911 to 1914, I believe, he felt his life was gone. His passion was gone. He could not paint anymore. So he actually said, the painter in me is dead. For 3 years, he did not pick up any paint and paintbrush. And things also get quite difficult for him because he had, who was this who said it before, that Monet had cataracts, right? So the cataracts got really bad on his right eye when he can't really see anything anymore, and the colors are all distorted. So some of his paintings, you may realize in the water lilies, that it's fiery. It's like everything is on fire. It's lots of red, lots of orange, right? Because of the cataracts really distorted the color, and he was very reluctant, very hesitant in going to the surgery. So he really dragged it out for almost a decade, and finally, at the encouragement of Clemenceau and all his friends, journalists like Geoffroy and his family, he decided to undergo the surgery in early 1920s. And so even after the surgery, he had to wear tinted glasses that he did not enjoy. But all of these difficulties, obstacles, right, did put a damper on his spirit for some time. Sometimes you would feel very frustrated and feeling that he's not producing competent work, and so he would have sulky days, even months, right, where he would not even want to receive his friends like Clemenceau. But there were also many more times that he came out of this depression and returned to paint. So for those 20 years of his final life, it's really a testament to how keen he was in his art. And I just want to show you on the days, he also how he would divide his work outdoors and indoors. So he would do a smaller study outdoors and then come back into his studio and paint larger formats, or he would, with the help of photography, he has a black room himself in the second house, and he would, with the help of photography as well, to help recall the details. So this is the end of his life. He's coming to a different realization of art. So earlier of his career, he's really keen in understanding how to capture light and fleeting moment outdoors, right? And he's still very interested in rendering the observation, right? But now, at the end of his life, so 20 years remaining his life, perhaps he's thinking about his legacy. Perhaps he's realizing all the rest of the painter friends that he had, like Pissarro, Renoir, Manet, Cézanne. All of those circles, Frederic Brasil died very early. They have all died, and he's one of the most longest living artists. And at this time, 1900s, Impressionism is already an old artistic movement. You have Cubism, you have Matisse, you have Picasso, you have all of this young upcoming artists that's coming. So, and Monet is on this threshold of, Impressionism and the modernist art movements, such as Cubism, so on and so forth. So he wanted to liberate himself in a way, right? He wanted to push himself to the next level, creating something that would end his life with a legacy, right? But also he wanted to really go forward with the descriptive function of his paintings, right? Instead of simply describing, recording, and conveying that fleeting moment, he wanted his art to be more of an emotional experience, sort of like Van Gogh's paintings. And so you can really see how he is chasing the colors, and this has become so mad. You see how many layers of colors, of different colors that he puts all over them, right? And it's because of his eye, it's because of his he's keen for the light, his keenness, his observation on the changing of the light. He's so talented at this. And this is why towards the end, when he worked on his grand murals for the orangerie, for the state, so he liberated himself from this mundane descriptive function and no longer wanting to produce just a realistic representation of the painting. He wanted to give form and means to the emotions that he was feeling. And for those of you who have been to the orangerie, right, I just want to very quickly show you, okay, I know we don't have too much time, but how do I? Okay, I already quit it, so. Okay, never mind. So what he did was actually take away the borders of the water pounds, right, and take away the bridges above the water lilies, and it is as if you are looking at the water lilies in the river, in the water by itself, and you're looking at the reflection of the clouds in the water, you're looking at the reflections of the wisteria in the water, and everything, you are consumed by the light and the water here. And the angle is the perspective of this painting is very different from his earlier lily paintings here. So in order to help him to achieve all of that effects, right? So this atmosphere. So there is a trick as well. So Monet used a different way of priming his canvases. So let me see. He primed his canvases with a specific color so that it would better reflect the layers of paint that he would add onto it. What color do you think it was? It was white. So contrary to the Renaissance painters who would use darker colors to produce a perspective, to better produce a perspective, to create the illusion of depth, he used white color, lead white color, to prime the canvas. And this reflected the paint, the light of the paint better. So to create water lilies of this ambition, this was the height, the length of the water lily was like the London double-decker bus. That's how tall it was, right? He had 8 of those water lilies, like lilies clouds, lilies in the morning, lilies at the sunset. So it's recording the emotion, the experience of the whole range of season, the day, the time of the day. So in order to produce such work, it takes a lot of organization, lots of planning and the foreground work. So this is why in his newly built studio, the 3rd studio that he built for this, by the way, this studio costed more than his house. He purchased his house in 1890 for 22,000 francs, but he actually spent more money in building this 3rd studio. For those of you who've been to Giverny, you know this is currently used as a souvenir shop on your way exiting the property. So that's where you will for sure will pick up some postcards and lovely souvenirs. So when he was in the process of creating this water lilies, again, visitors to Monet's studio observed that he had a lot of things that's laid out on the table, that he had about 75 paint brushes and 40 boxes of pigments that's put on the table. And all of these supplies were shipped weekly from Paris by train. And they were, he used only a few colors at this time. There's only about 6 major colors. He used the flake white, cadmium yellow, vermilion, deep madder, cobalt blue, and emerald green. So he just really played with the rhythm and with these 6 colors. And this is the result of his hard work, despite all that obstacles and sad, lonely times. So when he dies of lung cancer, everything then goes to his second younger son, Michel. Michel wasn't into art, wasn't into gardens, and Michel was into car racing and speed. And Michel lived quite long into his 80s and died of a car accident in Giverny. So when he died, without any children, he was married but without any child, and the whole estate went to the state. And so he willed the paintings, collection of Monet's paintings, to the Museum of Fine Arts, and this is where today you can see at Museum Marmottan. It's in Paris. I think it's in the 16th district. Can't remember. So it's west of Paris, opposite of the Eiffel Tower, on the right bank. And you of course see many Impressionist painters' work in Orsay. Of those water lily paintings, so that I just showed you, right? 8 of them in 2 oval rooms in the Orangerie. This was designed with the specific request of Monet. He wanted natural light. He wanted 2 connecting oval rooms, and he had a specific order for those paintings, how they should be placed. And none of you chose Louvre. In fact, you do see Monet's work in the Louvre. There's a few. Not the famous ones, but there's few, right? Maybe you've been told by tour guides before, there's no Monet in the Louvre, but there is in the French painting section of Monet's work. It was not meant to be there, but it's one of the patron of Monet. When he donated a bunch of art collections that he had to the state, he had a requirement that all of his collections remain in one setting. That included some of the Monet's work, but normally the Louvre holds paintings up until 1848. So, but it's correct that normally it shouldn't be there. So, to sum up for our very long and extended and full of technical challenges tour, here is a self-portrait of Monet in 1886 when things start to turn really good for him, right? When life is finally, rewarding him, right, with all that harvest that he had made, with all that hard times that he had endured, with all that faith that he had put into himself, with all that support that he had received from his friends, from Camille, right? And so this is the moment, right, 1886, that you're looking at one of the very rare self-portraits made by Monet himself. So thank you so much for those of you who are still here. Quite impressed, still 40 of you here. And I do really appreciate you coming. And I do know that it was not very smooth, but we're all here learning. And hopefully next time it will be better. And for those of you who are not, again, familiar with what we are trying to do here, so my husband, who just came in to help me, Farrell, and I, we are both tour guides since 2015, and we hope to keep our trade, to keep our passion alive by creating these webinar tours, live walking tours to you. And we run this weekly for free, but we do really appreciate your support, your donation for us. I don't know where the link went for the donation, but you can find it on YouTube, Facebook, events, and if somebody has it, I would appreciate that that somebody can maybe send it here. And we will be running, as I said, weekly. And next Saturday at 8 p.m., it will be Ferret demonstrating how to make the in-season fraisier, the strawberry cake. And next week on Saturday, it's going to be a vacation edition. So it will be a live walking tour of Strasbourg by Ferret as well. So if you have questions, I know that I had some questions early on from email. I believe Kimberly asked me about the house and the bridge of Monet's Giverny Gardens. So thank you very much, Pamela. This is the link I was talking about. Thank you very much. So early on, I had an email from Kimberly about whether the house and the Japanese bridge that we see today has been rebuilt. And so during World War II, I don't think there was bombing. My knowledge, right? So to my knowledge, there was no bombing. But when Monet died in 1926, it was Blanche, his stepdaughter, who was married to his oldest son, who had already died, John, who became his assistant, became his caretaker, and who lived on in Giverny and took care of the gardens. And when she died, it pretty much went into ruin because nobody was there anymore. Michel, his second son, wasn't living there, and Michel didn't really take care of it or hire people to take care of it. So it started to deteriorate the state. The tree branches were growing inside, and staircase collapsed. You know, the garden flower garden become wild, and so on and so forth. So by the time Michel dies in 1966, right, and this was then passed on to the state. Well, they didn't do anything about it immediately until much later, about I think 20 years later, because of one curator by the name Gerald van de Kamp, who reached out to the American donors, right? Pretty much you guys, right? And so from decades ago, asking for help, so for donations to help restore this place. So it's only from, I think, in 1990s where the house has been completely renovated, and I'm sure they have also adjusted the water lilies garden and the bridge as well, given so many years has passed by. So that's what happened. So it was not bombed. Monet actually used this place as an oasis to stay during the entire 4 years of World War I. He never left. He also donated money. He sent his vegetable garden produce to the local hospital for the soldiers. And so he really just stayed there and spent those 4 years of his during World War I. And this is why when he come out of World War I, he wanted to make a gesture and so leave a part of him, to the French nation. Therefore, the project of the grand water lily murals. So that was one question from Kimberly. I don't know if anyone else has questions here. Please feel free. I know, Violet, I started at 2. Now I am in year 2022, right? It's probably one of the longest tours I've done. But thanks to you guys, your interest here keeps me going, right? All right, any other questions? If not, I understand you all need a rest. So do I. So I hope to see you in the future tours, particularly in Paris. Please do take your time to like our Facebook page, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and so you really stay updates with our activities. And so exciting new news coming up from us, and so stay tuned. And meanwhile, have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't recognize the voice. Is it Pat?
Thank you.
No, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.